Violence erupts in Venezuela, and China will have to choose Maduro or Guaido. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Venezuela is in chaos again. Protesters and military clashed on Wednesday as armored vehicles drove into crowds of unarmed civilians. Tens of thousands took to the streets following a call from opposition leader Juan Guaido to overthrow the ruling Maduro regime.
The call is for everyone to come out into the streets at this moment to give backing to what we have built over years.
But Nicolas Maduro is not backing down, and that's become a big problem for the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese regime has some tough decisions to make when it comes to Venezuela. First, to intervene or not to intervene. The Chinese Communist Party has always criticized the U.S. for getting involved in other countries' internal affairs. At a meeting in Beijing over the weekend, Xi Jinping expressed that it's totally unacceptable when anyone tries to topple authorities in a third country, attempting to use force and illegal international pressure against a sovereign state in order to change the leadership there. And U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said the U.S. would potentially intervene in Venezuela.
Did the United States back this push by Juan Guaido or give any assurances to Guaido that the U.S. would support him?
Oh, we've made clear assurances all along that we'd support Juan Guaido and the National Assembly. They're the duly elected leaders of the Venezuelan government. So yes, we've provided strong assurances to them.
Uh-oh, that's not what the Chinese regime wants. They've invested tens of billions of dollars into Venezuela under the Nicolas Maduro regime. They supplied Venezuelan police with a lot of their equipment. And during this meeting last September, Xi Jinping promised Maduro to provide whatever help it can offer. Part of that help included a $5 billion credit line. China has also sent delegations to Venezuela as a show of support for Maduro, which is why Pompeo has recently said China and others are being hypocritical in calling for non-intervention in Venezuela's affairs. Their own financial interventions have helped destroy the country. Basically, he's saying China has no problem with countries intervening in the internal affairs of other countries as long as the country doing the intervening is China or Russia, just not the United States. But that leaves another tough decision for the Chinese Communist Party. What's the best way to intervene in Venezuela? Will it continue to throw its weight behind Maduro and hope that he can keep his grip on power, or should it back Guaido? Again, there's tens of billions of dollars of investment on the line. If China backs Maduro, but he gets ousted, Guaido might think twice about all that Chinese investment. On the other hand, if China backs Guaido and Maduro does manage to stay in power, that's pretty embarrassing. How do you explain that at your next friendship meeting? Everyone knows you can only have one best friend, and Guaido is definitely making his case to the Chinese regime that he can be their new bestie. He's penned a letter appealing to the better nature of Communist Party officials. He wrote that at least 87% of Venezuelans live in poverty, subject to 90% shortages in food and medical supplies. Basic services such as electricity and water have collapsed. The inflation rate exceeded 2.6 million% in January 2019 and threatens to reach 10 million% by the end of this year. But just in case Communist Party officials don't feel enough empathy for the people of Venezuela, Guaido also added another incentive. China is the world's largest oil importer, and Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. For those two reasons alone, the economic relationship between our nations will inevitably grow. That's better. But for now, it seems like the Venezuelan military is still backing Maduro, and there's always a chance Guaido could end up being detained or even disappearing. Of course, if that happens, the U.S. has said military options are on the table, or at least not off the table.
I don't think anyone should be fooled that if the president makes that decision, if he chooses a military option, that the United States military has the capacity to execute that option in a way that will achieve the outcome the president intends.
Which is the third problem for China, how to deal with the U.S. On the one hand, the Chinese Communist Party likes to act like a superpower, one that resists the U.S. Here's China's Foreign Ministry spokesman and retired Mortal Kombat character Liu Kang, responding to criticism from Mike Pompeo about China's role in Venezuela.
美国国务卿蓬佩奥对中国和中拉关系肆意诽谤、蓄意挑拨。
But on the other hand, China would not want to hurt its all-important ties with the U.S. because of its economic and investment interests in Latin America. China is still negotiating a trade deal with the Trump administration. It wouldn't want to jeopardize a deal with America just to help Maduro. Even less would the Chinese Communist Party want to find itself in a position where Chinese troops were caught in a skirmish with U.S. troops. What do you think of China's choices in Venezuela? Who will they give their friendship necklace to? Let me know in the comments below. What's that, Shelley? Oh, right. And now it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored with $1 or more per episode through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Peter Malchiotti asks, how does it make good business sense to deal with people who will end you as soon as they're done benefiting from you? Peter is asking about Western companies doing business in China. That's a good question. Basically, a lot of Western companies that have gone to China end up getting their intellectual property stolen, or they're forced to give it away, and a Chinese company then reverse engineers their product and then outcompetes the American company by making cheap knockoffs. And this is no accident. It's done precisely according to the Chinese Communist Party's plans for economically outcompeting the U.S. So why do Western companies keep jumping into the China market? Because there's money now. Consequences are later. Plus, when a lot of these companies started getting hacked and robbed, they tried to cover it up. I mean, getting taken advantage of like that is so embarrassing. What would shareholders think? So, wave after wave of companies go into China not knowing how previous companies had been taken advantage of, or thinking, of course, that they would be too smart to get taken advantage of, and they keep falling for it. Thanks for your question, Peter. And thank you to all my 50 Cent Army soldiers who support China Uncensored. It's only because of your support that we've been able to cover topics that most other media don't want to, because standing up to the Chinese Communist Party is really hard. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.